Mr. Freeze, Batman's winter-themed, frostiest, vengeance-plotting married man with a heart of ice-cold gold. A true staple in Batman's rogues gallery and widely considered to be one of his most tragic. But he wasn't always like this. Introduced in Batman number 121 of January 1959, Mr. Freeze, or Mr. Zero as he was known, began his criminal career as a lowly thief, whose prized target was diamonds, or ice as it were. In this first edition, there's no mention of Nora Freeze, his beloved wife, who would define all subsequent iterations of the character. Freeze's next notable iteration was 7 years later in the Adam West Batman TV series, specifically Season 1, Episode 7, Instant Freeze. Here, another iconic facet of Freeze's character is introduced, ditching the highlighter yellow suit of the comics for a sleeker spaceman look. The look was further expanded upon in Green Ice and Deep Freeze, where he was portrayed by Otto Preminger in what is probably the most iconic version of the villain in this series. Sporting the instantly recognisable Sub-Zero suit with flaming ginger eyebrows, Freeze was also given his sickly blue skin, another staple of the character. Mr. Freeze by this point in time was nothing more than a C-list gimmick villain on the level of King Tut and Egghead. A hitman with a freezing gun, as he has been called. This was true up until September 7th, 1992, when the third episode of the first season of Batman the Animated Series came out, entitled Heart of Ice. From there, the character of Mr. Freeze was revolutionised forever. This episode of BTAS is widely considered to be one of, if not the best, in the entire series, as well as being one of, if not the best superhero media pieces ever made. And the critics seem to agree, with it winning the 1992 Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing in an Animated Program. The episode opens with a dramatic monologue from the new and improved Mr. Freeze, here voiced by the late great Michael Ansara. The cold, calculating, emotionless performance by Ansara is one echoed through decades of Mr. Freeze performances as an integral part of the character's lineage. Speaking of integral, here we have the iconic imagery of the snow globe, often used by Freeze to represent his late wife Nora, encased in a cryogenic chamber awaiting treatment for her life-threatening disease. The robotic, unblinking eyes showed at the end of the monologue represents Freeze's detachment from humanity in the face of his primary objective. Here, Mr. Freeze's new and improved motivation and backstory are revealed to us. Mr. Freeze, or Dr. Victor Fries, is a doctor of unspecified scientific field at GothCorp, a leading pharmaceuticals company in Gotham. His wife Nora contracts a deadly unnamed virus with no cure. This leads Fries to begin developing a cryogenic stasis chamber to keep Nora alive until a cure for her condition can be found without it killing her first. All is well until GothCorp CEO Ferris Boyle cuts funding and charges into Fries's lab to shut it down by force. Following a quick scuffle, Fries is knocked into a table of chemicals and coolants. Boyle and his cronies escape to avoid taking the blame. When Fries emerges from the cloud of chemicals, he is frozen to the bone, his new body temperature so low that being outside of sub-zero temperatures would kill him. And so the motivation for Freeze here is not diamond robberies, but rather revenge, which, as we all know,
is a dish best served cold.
Freeze's plan to gain revenge is simple. Construct a mega ice cannon based on his own ice laser to kill Ferris Boyle for what he did to him. This new take on Freeze's story offers a tale of heartbreaking dedication in the face of insurmountable odds, a burning fire of passion contrasted with the physical frosty disposition of life. Somehow, in 20 minutes, the creative mind of Paul Dini revolutionised what was a gimmick villain into what is now one of Batman's most tragically cursed villains in the history of his rogues gallery. The design of Freeze doesn't stray too far from the original design in the 60s show, still keeping the 50s spaceman aesthetic, but with a new striking blue and grey colour scheme. One thing I like about Freeze's design is how it's introduced, not particularly flashy like many of Batman's other villains, but just by standing up in his truck. To Freeze, his armour bears no theatrical significance or grandiose, just a life support system he's forced to bear with him at all times. It's industrial and clunky and an inconvenience, almost like Darth Vader's armour. There's nothing intended to be flashy, it simply exists to serve a purpose. Ultimately, Heart of Ice is a story about parallels between Freeze, Batman and Boyle. Between Freeze and Boyle, Freeze, a literal heart of ice, while Boyle has a metaphorical one. demonstrated by his significant apathy towards the people of Gotham, whom he shows an extreme disdain for, often turning away the needy for the sake of profit.
Look, Bruce, that people company line is great PR, but when the wage slaves start acting like they own the place, it's time to pull the plug.
While Freeze himself may have a general emotionlessness towards everything, his love is a clear, burning reminder of his still beating heart, which sets him apart from men like Boyle. And then there's the parallels between Freeze and Batman. Both lost people whom they loved, but where Batman took the pain he felt towards that event and repurposed it into something he could use for the betterment of society, Freeze took the anguish he felt and wished for revenge on the man who had wronged him. This vengeance grew and grew until he was no longer the kind-hearted doctor he was before the coolant accident, but a heartless killing machine. In the end, this dynamic is one of grief and how we go about solving it. Batman's final quote to Freeze sums up their dynamic perfectly.
No justice.
Overall, if there was ever an incredible example of how to take a meaningless character and transform them into an iconic vessel for a real deep-reaching message, this is it. Now you would think after such an incredible character revolution that no one would ever go back to the classic Freeze persona of diamond robberies and ice gimmicks, right? Right? Well, the truth is in the crux of this video. Brought about by the 1997 Joel Schumacher box office flop, Batman and Robin. In Batman and Robin, Mr. Freeze, played here by the Terminator himself, Arnold's second name, has a similar backstory to BTAS Freeze. As quoted by Batman,
two-time Olympic decathlete and Nobel Prize winner for molecular biology.
What? A fucking what? Did he also cure cancer while he was at it? One of the best parts about BTAS Freeze was how he was just a regular old scientist, demonstrating how grief can manipulate all of us if we let it. By making Freeze a fucking Nobel Prize winner, yeah, it's no fucking wonder he went on an ego trip after becoming Mr. Freeze. And get this, Freeze's old tactics of stealing diamonds is back, this time because he needs them for diamond-powered lasers, which keeps his suit at sub-zero temperatures. Somehow. Speaking of, his suit looks like if the Tin Man started cutting himself, and also has tits. For some ungodly reason. In comparison with BTAS Freeze, Schumacher Freeze is bright, flashy and LED powered, a beacon of marketability removing all nuance from the design. We first meet Freeze in the Gotham Museum where he plans to steal a diamond as previously mentioned, where we get his first line of dialogue.
The Iceman cometh.
Herein lies the worst aspect of this character interpretation. The fucking ice puns. This one specifically bears interest to me, however, as it is Freeze's first piece of dialogue, almost setting him up to be a joke of a character. The referenced Iceman from Eugene O'Neill's play is a metaphorical representation of death, although I don't think the writing team thought that much into it. Ironically, with the first line of dialogue, Schumacher Freeze has announced himself as not only the bringer of death to Freeze as a character, but for the entire Schumacher franchise. One positive to this movie I can give though is I do like the design of the Freeze goons compared to BTAS. The hockey player aesthetics lead to much more interesting designs and better fight choreography than just punches. After this kerfuffle, we get to the new backstory of Freeze. Instead of having his experiment shut down, he slips on a banana peel and falls into a vat of coolant, causing him to not be able to breathe outside of sub-zero environments. This removes a vital motivation for Freeze's first story, that being revenge. He has no one to target his anger towards, and so removes a vital part of his identity and parallel with Batman. He does, however, have a parallel with Batman in this movie, that being the fear of loss. Alfred the Butler contracts McGregor's disease, named after the producer of the film, Peter McGregor Scott. With the fear of losing Alfred, a parental figure for the young Bruce, he is determined to find Freeze to get a cure. Freeze, however, turns to crime to fund his research into saving Nora. Not particularly deep, but you know, at least they tried. So what is it about Schumacher Freeze that makes him so damaging to the future of the Snowman? To me at least, the legacy of ice puns, terrible costume choices, and abhorrent writing has led to the cultural zeitgeist to see our beloved Victor Freeze as nothing more than a sad joke. Which is a shame, considering all the work of comics to distance themselves from this stereotype. Yes, I may have been a tad hyperbolic. While Freeze to the outsider is nothing more than a mediocre Arnie role, to the comic community, he remains a steadfast figure of emotional storytelling in comics and comic book media. Many interpretations of the character reflect the idea of Freeze brought about by Paul Dini back in 1992. The damage to Freeze's character brought on by the 1997 Schumacher film still remains a sore spot for many fans of the character, as no matter how many innovative versions of the character exist, he is still forced into the box of just another gimmick villain. And that, my friends, is how a character can be risen to the highest highs of characterization and then have its wax wings melted by one shit movie. Happy Christmas. The Iceman cometh! Fuck me, that was terrible. Holy fuck.